Ratings agency Standard & Poor have upgraded their outlook for the US economy from negative to stable. Is this the message that investors are needing, that the US economy is finally back on track? Well, here to discuss is John Hancock. John, thank you very much for coming in today.
Great to be here.
Now, this reversal comes 2 years after the S&P decided to give a negative outlook for the US economy. At the time, it caused a huge political firestorm and economic firestorm. Is this a big deal? What kind of message does this give to investors and indeed market sentiment?
Well, I'm not so sure the rating agencies have quite the impact they had, say, 5 years ago. I mean, one of the big casualties of this gigantic global financial crisis was, in fact, the rating agencies who didn't see it coming and seemed to underestimate the severity of the storm that hit us. And also, it's just human nature. Bad news always makes more news than good news. I think what this signals is, in fact, what markets have already seen coming. A trickle, not a torrent, of fairly good economic news out of the US, including shrinking deficits, which is probably very important to the Standard & Poor's decision to, in fact, upgrade US debt and the US outlook.
Now, the report, one of the things that they picked up on was this US dollar's status as the key reserve currency. And that's why they've reversed this, their outlook for the US economy as a whole. Is this a fair assessment to make, John? What do you think?
Well, I think it's a fair assessment, and it shows how, the more things change, the more they don't. I mean, 4 years ago, everyone was in a panic saying we can no longer rely on the US dollar. This financial crisis shows how exposed we are to the vicissitudes of the US central bank and US fiscal and monetary policy. We need an alternative. Even the Central Bank of China was floating ideas about using IMF facilities as a kind of quasi-global reserve currency. People looked at the euro. Some people even suggested that we were going to look at the renminbi as a possible reserve currency. 4 years later, not much has changed. We're still with the greenback, and that's partly because the euro doesn't look so successful right now. Lots of question marks over the euro. The renminbi is still not an exchangeable currency. There's still big capital controls in China. So almost as a last resort, or as the only resort, we're left with the US dollar. Very
much so. Now, the report comes after a mixed bag of data, lackluster data from some angles for the US economy. Do you think this is maybe some analysts are saying that it's a bit premature from the S&P's reversal? What do you think?
No, I don't think it's premature. I think we do tend to be pessimistic. We've had so much bad news and so many false dawns that now we're almost surprised when good news comes along. And in that sense, I think the S&P is more of a trailing indicator than a leading indicator of what's changing in the US. Having said that, we have to face facts. We had a great recession, the Great Recession, and now we've got a not so great recovery. I mean, the numbers are not fantastic. They're a recovery, but the US economy is not roaring back. GDP last quarter has been revised downward slightly. It's certainly not the 4% that people were expecting. It's 2.4%. Unemployment is still far too high. Consumer confidence is up, but not remarkably so. So the US economy is recovering, but it's a fairly anemic recovery. And what makes that so interesting, I think, is that we forget that if you put the US back in the global picture, the global economy is following roughly the pattern we'd expect it to follow after every recession in the modern era. We had recessions in 75, 81, 91, 2008. This recovery, this global recovery, is following a more or less similar path. At least that's what the IMF's figures tell us. What's different this time is that the emerging economies are recovering much more quickly and more robustly, and the advanced economies more slowly and more anemically. And that balances out into a broadly similar global picture, but big differences between the advanced and the developing world.
Yeah, it's like a two-tier system almost,
Almost
isn't
a two-tier system, you're absolutely right.
But if we look at, you mentioned unemployment figures there, NFP NFP Friday there last week. It came in better than expected, but however it did show that unemployment still ticked up a little bit. Some analysts are saying off the back of this that the US Federal Reserve will start tapering, or will keep QE in place until around the October mark. What are you sort of thinking about this?
Well, it's always tough to predict what policymakers are going to do in October. Look, it's tough predicting what policymakers are going to do next week, let alone in 3-4 months' time. I'm a bit like the famous economist Paul Samuelson. He famously said that he picked 9 out of the last 4 recessions. I mean, I could give you a prediction, and my prediction would be yes. I think they're going to keep their policy in place because, frankly, it's this anemic recovery. Whether you blame it on uncertainty, the kind of climate of uncertainty that surrounds this recovery, and if the central bank's policy is one plank of stability in an otherwise unstable sea of economic news, then they're going to keep that plank in place. Maybe it's because they haven't seen signs of resurgent inflation. I think that's one of the most important features of this recovery. I mean, so far it has not materialized, which means the Fed at least has the luxury of continuing this policy. And it's, I don't think they want to take their foot off the gas pedal yet.
It's one of the interesting things is that the tapering off of the QE would suggest that the economy is getting better, but people are so worried of going cold turkey without the QE. They kind of go, oh no, what's going to happen then?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point, though. I mean, a lot of people are saying exactly what you're pointing out. I mean, for example, we see bond spreads growing quite dramatically in recent weeks, and everyone's going, oh my God, what does this mean? What does this mean? Similarly, with what happens if they take away the punch bowl, if the Fed starts raising interest rates. You're right. I mean, both those things are, broadly speaking, a sign that things are getting better. You raise interest rates because you feel that the economy has in a sense got traction. The bond yields are going up because people are not worried that inflation's going to come back. There's alternative options for investors and investing capital. So these are themselves positive signs, and yet we're so pessimistic right now, so irrationally pessimistic, that even the good signs become bad news.
I guess it is human instinct that we love a little bit of bad news. We're not happy unless we've got some sort of drama. But John, thank you so much for coming in and talking it through with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Well, that's all from John and myself from the moment. Later on, we have Laja Fee joining us in the studio, so please do click back for that. Goodbye for now.